Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stephanie Reads. Today I'm going to be talking about the Eragon series. It's not really called the Eragon series. Eragon is the first book and it's the most well known, but it's actually technically called the Inheritance Cycle. But I figured if I said that, no one would know what I was talking about, which is fair because I mostly wouldn't have known what you were talking about. I had heard someone else say that. So we're going to talk about the Eragon cycle. No. The Eragon series / the Inheritance Cycle. Now, these are a high fantasy I would say they start as like middle grade books and then end up as like YA books. Kind of Harry Potter style, not actually in the storyline, but like in the way that the age progresses throughout the books, and they start off much younger and end off much darker and older. So kind of bear that in mind if you're trying to decide what kind of age category this book series is for. I would suggest, having recently reread them, I would say the first book is probably more along like 12 or 13, and the last books are probably more like 16 to 17 would be my best guess, but obviously everyone's totally different, and it's not necessarily that things get too dark or anything for the younger kids. It's mostly just it gets more weighty and more densely written, and so you need kids who have a more sturdy what's the word I'm looking for? Attention span. Shiny. I can't think of the word attention span. And that would be a phrase, not a word. The term. So anyway, yeah, the general gist is that Eragon, when he is, I don't know, 12 or so, is out in the forest hunting several miles from his family farm when this mysterious stone drops out of the sky next to him. He takes it home thinking maybe it's beautiful, so maybe he can sell it for something. And it turns out to be a dragon egg.
Spoilers.
There's literally a dragon on the front of the book.
Spoilers.
So
Could've been
this
anything.
dragon egg ends up uprooting his entire life and starts him on this lifelong quest, basically. This is all set in a world where this evil ruler has taken over and has been ruling the country for like 1,000 years, basically. So there's a lot of unrest, and he kind of gets swept up into that, and the story progresses from there. I don't really want to say too much more because this is a storyline that stretches across 4 books. So if I give a general overview, I'm going to be spoiling stuff for earlier books. I read this when I was much younger originally and loved it. Loved it so much that I broke one of my cardinal rules and I finished book 2 or 3. I can't remember. It must have been book 3 in paperback. I was buying books back then. I haven't bought books in a super long time, but I was buying books back then. So I had the first 3 in paperback, finished it, and was like, I have to know what's going on, but the 4th book is only out in hardback. It hasn't come out in paperback yet. And having non-matching sets super bothers me, like, a lot. And so normally I'd be like, whatever, I'll just get it from the library, read it there, and then I will wait and buy it in paperback. But the line at the library was so long that I just broke down and bought it in hardback, which is, I think, probably the only time I've ever done that. I'm pretty sure. That's the only time I've ever bought it. I never owned any of the Harry Potter books. Thank you. I never owned any of the Harry Potter books until the entire series was out and I could go and buy a box set, to give you an idea. And Harry Potter is literally my favorite series of all time. So yeah, I read this when I was probably like in my early 20s and loved it a lot. I went back to try and reread it for this review, read the first one and barely made it through, started the second one and was like, there's no way I can do this. I just found it, I feel like the author relies a lot on not knowing what's going on to keep you reading, because the reading is really, really dry and really, really dense in some parts, but you're not sure what's going on with like the entire world. So you're like, I gotta keep reading. But because I generally knew what was going on, it didn't hold my interest at all. So the writing is really densely written. It is a high fantasy, so that's not super shocking. There's a lot of world building that needs to happen. There's all kinds of politicking that needs to be explained. The characters and the plot are slowly unveiled. You're halfway through book 3 and you're still not entirely sure what's going on. I mean, or not book 3, book 4. You're halfway through the last book and you're still like, where are we going with this? Like, what's going on? Like, I'm not totally sure who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And a lot of that is that no one is truly like the good guy, and there's only a handful of people that are truly like the bad guys. It's all a matter of perspective, and a lot of times people are just doing stuff that may be evil from your perspective, but they're trying to save their own people. And so there's a lot of that, which I appreciated. That's very nuanced, and you don't always see that in a lot of books. However, when you have already read it and know where it's going, you're like, ugh. So I would suggest, if you are going to read this, maybe don't buy it. Maybe borrow it from Maybe borrow it from a friend. Get it from the library. If you are going to buy it, maybe get it at half price somewhere, at Half Price Books, or the thrift store or whatever. Because I don't think it does well on reread. It is densely written. There's alternating plot lines. You have, the first book is, I think the first book might be entirely told from Eragon's perspective, but later books start to splinter and you get more and more perspectives that it's told from. So you have, and it's not just like, oh, two people that are in the same room are telling it from their perspective. It's one person's on this side of the continent, this person's on this other side of the continent. So you're getting truly two different storylines. And that really helped to break it up for me when I was doing my reread. I definitely felt like it got better once other storylines were introduced, because it did help break it up. This like really dense, really heavy world building, politicking sort of bog down. And if you haven't already read it, the author does do a good job of just giving you enough to be like, oh shoot, what's going to happen? And then just giving you enough, just when you're like, okay, I can't read this anymore. He gives you just another tidbit and you're like, oh snap. And then your interest starts to wane again. And then he's like, haha, here's another tidbit. So like I said, on your first read through, it doesn't feel nearly as heavy as it does on your second read through. So I don't want to make it sound like it's just like this unbearable read, because it's not, if you don't know what's going on. The characters are really well drawn. Everyone is flawed. Everybody. And that's part of what I was saying, is that nobody is like truly just a good guy. Everybody has done stuff they're not proud of. Everyone has done terrible things, but for good reasons. There's layers to everybody. And that includes, like an onion. And that includes the bad guys too. The other thing is, these characters are developed over time, because a lot of the characters are very young when the book starts. Not all of them. We've got some elves that have been around for several hundred years and, whatever. But the main...
Do we?
We do. But most of the main characters are human and are, like, in their teens.
A different book.
He likes to give me a hard time. He loves to give me a hard time. Yeah, so you literally watch them grow up. So there's a lot of character development just because more is revealed about them. But there's also character development just because they're growing up and learning who they are. There's a lot of self-reflection on Eragon's part, especially, where he's just like, am I a good person? I have these skills. What does that mean for me? And how do I deal with them? And how do I use them in a way that betters the world? Or if I use them at all, does that make the world worse? And so you actually get to watch him decide what kind of person he becomes, which if you are into books that are really character centered, this has a lot of that. A lot of character development in like a political setting where people are like making words are hard today.
Alliances, right?
Alliances, thank you. So you get to watch a lot of character development, not just like one person growing up, but them making allegiances on a grander scale and how that influences how they behave, and also them growing up and just learning that the world's a lot bigger than they are or that they ever thought it was. And so that is really well done, really deeply done as well. And it gives the characters a very lifelike feel. They feel like real people because they're going through a lot of stuff, and it's, like I said, they're very flawed in a completely natural, lifelike way. The storyline emphasizes people, and I'm personally more of I like enough character development that the people feel real to me, but mostly I like good plot-centered books, which I think is part of the reason why I had a hard time getting through this the second time, because the plot since I already knew where the plot was going, it was mostly just world building and character development, which doesn't really interest me nearly as much, but it does that really well. So if that's your thing, that is definitely the focus of this. This is all about people and them reacting to the lot they've been given in life and how they adapt to their situations, basically. There's a lot of interior, psychological kind of things going on. It is told from the third person perspective, but we get lots and lots of scenes where it's just Eragon kind of mulling stuff over in his head, really like thinking through stuff that's happened and him processing crap that's gone down and that sort of thing. So it is very much a people-centered, character-centered book. The frame and the tone is, you have this exquisitely detailed background of this. It's not just this country, but it's basically this continent that's more or less under siege from this tyrant king who has has completely gone mad and is doing things that he should not be doing. And you get this really lush background that gives this philosophical kind of tone to the book, because people are trying to decide what is right, what is wrong, what are we going to put up with, what are we not going to put up with. Is it right to try and overthrow this government, even though it technically is providing for us, but it's also doing these terrible things? Like, where do you draw the line? That sort of a thing. So it's this political, philosophical, lush world. And there's a lot of detail also about the magic in it. And it's not a unique magic system, so I'm not going to really go into too much detail, because if you read this book, there will be all kinds of detail thrown at you. So that's Eragon. That's not Eragon. Eragon is the first book. This is the inheritance cycle. And if you are into epic fantasies that involve dragons and magic and elves and dwarves and, fighting the evil in the world, while also dealing with stuff like coming of age and political intrigue and that sort of thing, this book kind of has it all. It's just a matter of if it's going to have it in the right ratio for you. So, like I said, it's not an action-oriented book. So if you're really into like the thriller kind of political intrigue, this is not going to be interesting enough for you. But if you like that, but are more into character-driven books, you might be super interested in this. So I loved it when I was younger. I did not so much on my second time around, but again, I think that's because all of the actual plot interest was lost on the second read through. So Alrighty, guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe before you leave. And until next time, happy reading. Words are hard today. What's the thing where... No, not that.
Connections.
No, kind of, but like
Lights,
allegiances and like,
trees.
what is it like when one royal family marries another royal family to kind of...
Inbreeding.
I said another royal
Oh,
family,
okay.
not the same royal family.
Alliances, right?
Alliances, thank you. We had said everything else.
Sorry, I thought that was already.
I said allegiances,
Oh.
which wasn't quite the right thing.
Magic is hard.
Magic is hard.
That's why I keep listening.